there was an explosion that took place somewhere in the universe. And of course, the phrase, the Big Bang, is common. The idea that an explosion created all of the order that we see in the universe has been held for many years as an accepted idea. Now, perhaps some of you have seen charts representing this concept. Here's a chart out of a science yearbook indicating that an explosion took place, and as a result of this explosion, we're told that everything that exists in the universe is coming into being, including the planet Earth. And then on the planet Earth, we see that atoms have become molecules. Then molecules have come together to become single-celled life. Then single-celled life has progressed and developed to become multicellular life. And down the chart, we see that multicellular organisms become more complex. Mollusks become fish. Fish become amphibians. Amphibians become reptiles. And eventually, we see the mammals appear, and eventually man at the bottom of the chart. A product of an explosion and billions of years of time. Now, some of you might suggest, how is that possible that scientists could believe this idea? What evidence has there been put forward to support this concept? Well, let's look at another statement which indicates the confidence that some have in this Big Bang thesis. Here's an article from a Science Digest article entitled "The First Billion, 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 Billionth of a Second." And then, using a simple system of logic, we can now deduce in exact detail just what happened during the first split second of creation. Now, isn't it amazing what scientists can do when you think about it? They say they can go back to that minute fraction of a second, billions of years ago in the past, and tell us what took place using logic. But think for a moment. What does your logic tell you about explosions? Has anyone ever observed an explosion that has created order? Not that I know of. Well, if it's happened, then it should be scientifically reproducible and observable. And we should be able to explode some objects and make some observations to see order progressing. That has never occurred. And I would challenge anyone to perform experiments, one after another, to find out whether or not it's possible for an explosion to produce order from disorder. You see, given common sense and logic and the laws of physics, we see that things proceed in a direction from order to disorder, not disorder to order. For example, the second law of thermodynamics clearly indicates to us that given time, things proceed in this direction. Let's use this illustration. If you're to take a pile of blocks and stack them up neatly, given time, that pile of blocks would eventually degenerate and break down. Or if you bought a brand new car and placed it in a garage and left it there for 100 years, do you think it would get better? No, it would degenerate, deteriorate, break down. Our bodies are aging. Cells break down. The sun is burning out. Things are proceeding from order to disorder. And yet evolution, contrary to the physical or observable evidence, says that disorder can become order given time. Random chance events. So the very foundational principle of evolution seems to be in question. Secondly, evolution teaches that non-living material can actually become living material given time, long periods of time. Now, again, has anyone ever observed this? Has this ever taken place? Have we ever seen non-living elements joining themselves together to becoming life? If evolution is true, then we should be able to find this kind of evidence. And once again, we can make observations, and if evolution can't be backed up by observations, then we need to change our theories. This is a typical explanation that evolutionists have regarding this subject of origins, taken from a science textbook for children. The book is entitled Giants of the Animal World. The author is Benjamin Bova, and he says this: scientists are not sure of how it happened, but they believe that life began about 2 billion years ago in the shallow waters of some unknown seacoast. Now notice, they're not sure of when it happened, how it happened, or where it happened, but they believe that it happened by this process called evolution. When we were doing our film documentary, The Evolution Conspiracy, we traveled to many different locations, museums, universities. We went to the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., and we interviewed the curator of the non-life-to-life portion of the museum. And we asked him this question: as an evolutionist, could you explain to us how non-life became life? And so he was standing there in front of the cameras, the lights were on him, and he began his explanation. And he tried 3 times to come up with an explanation, and 3 times stuttered, stammered, and stopped. And finally he said, I'm sorry, I just can't formulate the words. I can't get the right words today to describe this process, and you're just going to have to find somebody else. And so he wouldn't say any more, and he wouldn't sign the release so that we could use his statement in the film. And the cameraman was putting the camera away, and this curator of the museum started to chuckle, and he said to the cameraman, he said, I shouldn't tell you this, but this part of the museum is just a bunch of nonsense. He said, there's no evidence to support what I'm trying to tell you. It's all speculation. And the reason he said that is because he was attempting to explain the origin of life by pointing to a mural similar to this here, showing a lightning bolt striking a pond, and the claim was that life originated. Well, they also had a cartoon theater at the Smithsonian as well, which explained the origin of life, called the Chon-Chon Theater. Carbon and hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen were cartoon characters. And they joined hands together, and after a little song and dance, they snap their hands, and away they come together, and they become a cell. But cartoons and murals do not prove anything. If this is scientifically verifiable and true, then we must see the evidence. We must see non-life becoming life. And that's not been observed. You see, over 300 years ago, they believed that if you laid garbage outdoors, it would eventually turn into flies, and then maggots, and then rats. Because they believed in spontaneous generation. And then a scientist by the name of Francesco Redi decided that he would prove scientifically that this was not the case. And so he took the garbage, covered it over with screen with very small holes, and of course flies were not able to get to the garbage, nor the rats, and he proved you cannot get living creatures from garbage spontaneously. And today we think that's rather funny. How could they have believed in that in the past? But when we look at the charts which depict evolution, we have the same idea. For we are told that in the past, a long time ago, atoms became molecules, became complex molecules, became single-celled organisms by process of spontaneous generation. You see, time seems to have a major impact on our thinking. When we look at things around us today, all living creatures that we can observe, we know that they have come from previous living organisms. In fact, that's a law of biology. It's called the law of biogenesis. Life comes from pre-existing life. And that agrees with the creationist perspective. The third foundational principle of evolution deals with one single word: time. For evolution, time is absolutely essential. It is what I call the magic factor. It makes an improbable, impossible, unbelievable idea seem like it may have happened. Let me illustrate to you how important time is. If I were to, for example, go to one of the universities, colleges in this area, and claim that I wanted to write a new doctoral thesis on the subject of the origin of mankind, and I took with me a jar of single-celled organisms, an amoeba, and I said, I believe that these single-celled organisms can become men in the matter of a few minutes or a few hours. What do you think would happen? I would be looked at like I was crazy. But if I went to the same institute and I said, I believe that a single-celled organism like an amoeba can become a man over millions and millions of years of time, and I'd like to write my doctoral thesis on the subject, what do you think would happen? I would be told, well, you're too late. We already believe this. In fact, I would be shown the Darwinian tree of life. including the planet Earth. And then on the planet Earth, we see that atoms have become molecules. Then molecules have come together to become single-celled life. Then single-celled life has progressed and developed to become multicellular life. And down the chart, we see the explosion and billions of years of time. Now, some of you might suggest, how is that possible that scientists could believe this idea? What evidence has there been put forward to support this concept? Well, let's look at another statement, which there was an explosion that took place somewhere in the universe. And of course, the phrase, the Big Bang, is common. The idea that an explosion created all of the order that we see in the universe has been held for many years as an accepted idea. Now, perhaps some of you have seen charts representing this concept. Here's a chart out of a science yearbook indicating that an explosion took place, and as a result of this explosion, we're told that everything that exists in the universe is coming into being, that multicellular organisms become more complex, mollusks become fish, fish become amphibians, amphibians become reptiles, and eventually we see the mammals appear, and eventually man at the bottom of the chart, a product of an explosion.